We're on the bottom now of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, and we're going back to the Mishnah. So we're up to the beginning of the wide lines, towards the end of that line, Ulu Masam B'Tzafon. So you had the four gates on the south and the corresponding four gates on the north. And the Mishnah had told us that according to the Chachamim, there were no 13 gates, there were only 7 gates to enter into the Azara, but at the time of the Yevanim, when they broke down the Soreg, and the Chashmonaim came and repaired the Soreg in 13 different breaches at those points that were fixed up by the Chashmonaim, there would be Ashtachava in each one of those 13 restoration places, according to the Chacham. Now, once we discussed the Yevanim, now we're going to fast forward by 2 centuries to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. At Motzei B'Shashal Nebuchadnezzar Lekan, Nebuchadnezzar came to Eretz Yisrael, Bavi Yosha B'Dofnei Shel Antochia. So that's where he set up his domicile. And Yotza Sanhedrin Gedol Lekroso. Already the Sanhedrin understood that if Nebuchadnezzar was establishing his place in Palestine, he was about to destroy the Mikdash. So they sent out a greeting from the Sanhedrin, V'Amrlo, and they said, Higias mana ba'isli azeli chorev, meaning, are you going to come and destroy the Beis HaMikdash? Is that your intention? Amar lahen, he says, right now, at this point, Oso shemlachti alechem tnu li, the one that I appointed to reign as the Melech of you, I want him back. Vani holech, and then I'll get out of here. Bo v'Amar li hoyochin, Melech Yehuda. So the group of the Sanhedrin came to the Melech and they said, Nebuchadnezzar boilach. Nebuchadnezzar is here and he wants you. Evan sheshama men kach, he understood that the Mikdash is going to be destroyed. Natal maftecho shel Beis HaMikdash, ol legago shel heichal. He takes the keys to the Mikdash and he climbs up to the roof. Amar lefanav, he says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shel olam, l'sha'avar ayinu ne'emanim l'cha, the Jewish people were faithful. V'ayim afteichosea mesurim lanu, the keys to the Beis HaMikdash were given to us. You wanted our service, our avodah, the Mikdash. Achshav she'enanu ne'emanim, now that we violated all of the sins, and especially, of course, sinas chinam, harei maftechos, I'm giving you back the keys. And there are 2 nuschos, exactly what happened at that moment. Train Amaron. Chad Amar, according to one opinion, Zrakon the Od lo yardu. He threw them up to the heavens and they never came down. V'chad Amar ba kimin yad unetalasan miyado. And something that looked like the form of a hand came down from Shemayim and grabbed onto the keys. In any event, it's clear that we no longer have the keys. Either they never came down and defied the law of gravity, or they were taken by this hand. Kevan Sharo Kol. Now we turn to Yud Zayin at base. Kol Chore Yehuda came. When all the important people of Yehuda saw this, O L'Roshka Goseim v'Naflu Mesi. Many Jews were destroyed, were killed, and murdered, but the noblemen of Yehuda actually took their own death. Hadod D'Chsiv, and this we derive from a pasuk Yeshayahu Navi. Masa Gei Chizayon Malacha Efo Ki Alisa Kulcha Kulach Legagos Chuos Malea Ir Homia, a prophecy about the valley of vision, which is called Yerushalayim. What happened to you now that you have all ascended to the rooftops? You have been full of commotion. The city, which was a tumultuous city, an exuberant city, now you're slain, are not victims of the sword or casualties of the war, but rather they took their own life. And this leads us to the Mishnah about Shulchanus. There were 13 tables in the Mikdash. Shmona shel shayish, 8 tables were made of marble, not of metal, not silver, not gold, even though marble is less important than silver of gold, but it was the basement b'chayim, and that's where they shechted the karbanos, and they needed to do hafshatas ha'or, and it would take a certain amount of time until they would complete this whole process. So they didn't want the basar to get spoiled in the hot sun, sitting on a hot metal plate. So therefore, they put it on marble. Marble is a little cooler. If you put your hand on your chayish, you'll see it's cold. And then they washed the innards of the kishkis of the animal after shechita. There were another two tables that were located right next to the kevesh on the Ma'ariv side to the west of the kevesh. Echad shel shayish ve'echad shel kesef. Al shel shayish nosim es ha'avorim. Right, the avorim which were meant to be taken onto the mizbeach hakara, we wanted to make sure they wouldn't get spoiled by result of the heat of the metal. So therefore, they were placed on a marble table. Al shel kesef b'kli sharis. And on a daily basis, they took out 91 vessels of klishares, 93 actually, in order to use them in the course of the avodah. They were placed on these tables that were made of silver. Ushnayim bu'ulam mibifnim al pesach habayis. So you enter into the doorway of the Beis Hamikdash, and you reach the ulam, and there you'll find another two tables. These are for the lechem aponim. Echad shel shayish ve'echad shel zav. And what were they? How do they function? Al shel shayish nosim lechem aponim b'knisasa. So that when the new baked breads for the upcoming week were complete, they were placed on a lechem shel shayish, so that again, the lechem aponim would not spoil. The Gemara is going to ask later on, well, who cares about spoilage? It was a miracle in the lechem aponim. Anyway, and al shel zav b'yitziyasa, there was another table that was made of gold, and that was designated for the outgoing lechem aponim at the end of the week. And then they were immediately eaten by the kohanim, so there was no chashash of spoilage. And not only that, but when we're dealing with lechem aponim, we're dealing with kodesh, and the rule is ma'ila b'kodesh lo moridin. So we go from the lower level of shayish, of a shulchan shel shayish, to the higher level of shulchan shel zav, ma'ila b'kodesh lo moridin. And some seem to indicate that this is the source for the principle that we find all over Shas of ma'ila b'kodesh lo moridin. Echad shel zav mibifnim she'olav lechem aponim tamid. There was another table inside the heichal. That was the table on which the showbread, the lechem aponim, was placed, 6 on one side, 6 on the other, and it was made of zav. And the lechem aponim was there continuously. We'll see exactly what that means. Tani, we learned in a brisa, al shel kesef. The lechem aponim was first placed on a table of silver. That's against our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that the lechem aponim was first placed on a table made of shayish. So we see that there's machlokas between the Tan of our Mishnah and the Tan of this brisa. Rabbi Yossi, b'shem Rab Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, or others say it was Rab Chanina, Rab Chananya, Mati ba b'shem Rab Yochanan, is leskan shel kesef. The Mishnah doesn't have kesef. It doesn't have a table made of silver when they first placed the lechem aponim on the table. Because the silver heats up as a result of the sun, and that's going to speed up the process of spoilage of the lechem. So Gemara says, "Lo kain tani." Why would we need such a protective measure when we have a statement of the Brisa, Zeh echad min hanisim shenas beis hamikdash shekshem shayu menichim osel chom kacha yomotzim osel chom. Imagine the lechem upon it was baked and lasted for a week on the shulchan. It was warm and fresh when you took it off at the end of the week as it was the beginning of the week. So clearly, the lechem upon it did not function according to natural law, but rather was protected by supernatural law. Shenemar lasum lechem chom biyom hilacho. The pasuk in Shmuel means to tell us that the bread was hot on the day that they took it off, its removal as it was hot at the day that it was placed. So if this miracle maintained and guaranteed the heat of the lechem upon it, there would be no shash of spoilage. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Omar, he says, "Hey, maskir, ma'aseh nitzin." We don't function based on miracles. Again, right now we have Baruch Hashem a miracle, but what will be tomorrow? We have no guarantee. We have to do whatever we have to do within the physical universe to try to protect spoilage. Now, I'm tempted to think, although I have no proof for this, that the Brisa that the Gemara quoted at the beginning maintains that we can be somech al hanes as long as the miracle is continuing. So we could put the lechem upon him on a shulchan of kesef. Bon kume Rabbi Lo. There was a question that was asked of Rabbi Lo. Lo hayusham lechem. What if there was no replacement of lechem? For whatever reason, they did not have another 12 lechamim to replace this week's 12 lechamim. Now, the week ended, and now we have a psul of lina, which means that when things are left in their place in the mikdash beyond their time, they become possible. So what should we do in such a case? Some lechem, lo hayasham lechem, there was no lechem to replace the old lechem. Ma'ula nichal l'Shabbos haba. Is there a psul of lina? Or even if I agree that there is a psul of lina, then maybe Allah in the chefts of the shulchan, it shouldn't be reikam, it shouldn't be empty, and therefore we should keep on the shulchan last week's lecham, and even if that possibly didn't lina. Alone, so Rav said to them, Ksiv, the pasuk says in Shmos, Perkafei, V'nasata al shulchan hashulchan lechem panim lefanai tamid. Tamid means that it should always have lechem upon it. It should never be a moment. In fact, the Gemara has a whole discussion about how they replaced last week's lechem with this week's lechem in such a way that there would never be a moment that would be mafkia tamid. But in any event, from the fact that it says tamid, it means lechem panim afilu pasul. Now here's a girsa issue, but if you have the girsa that we have pasul, it means that even though the lechem after a week became possibly din lina, but nevertheless we still keep it on the mitzvah, on the shulchan because of the word tamid. The other girsa doesn't have afilu pasul, but it has afilu. What was the other? Afilu hu kama yamin. It's even after many days, but it's not really possible because there's no psul lina with regard to lechem upon. Now the Brisa says asar shulchanos asar shlomo. Now there was the shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that was still in existence even at the time of the Beis Hamikdash. And then Shlomo Melech built another 10 shulchanos, 5 on each side of the shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu, 11 shulchanos all told. And the questions could be, why do we need 11 shulchanos? Vayash shulchanos asara, vayanach behechal chamisha miyamin v'chamisha mismol. 5 to the right and 5 to the left. Now we're going to see how these tables were structured. Were they north to south or east to west in the Heichal? In Tamar Chamisha B'Dorm Chamisha B'Tzafon, if we're going to assume that there were 5 on the south, right? We always said the south is towards the left. and north is towards the right. So there's chamisha b'tzafon towards the right. V'lo ein shulchan kosher ela b'tzafon. We have a pasuk that in Shmos Chavav that teaches us that the shulchan must be in the tzafon. Shenemar v'shulchan titein al tzela tzafon. It has to be on the north side of the Mishkan, not on the south side. But now we're saying that the pasuk indicates that Shlomo Melech had 5 tables on the south side. How could that be possible? So the Gemara says we have to reinterpret mismol and miyamin. El chamisha mimin shulchan shel Moshe v'chamisha mismol. That there were 5 to the left of Moshe's table and 5 to the right, but they were all located in the tzafon. All 11 shulchanos. So the Brisa says the following. Afal pichein lo haya mesader ela b'shal Moshe bilvat. There was no need for more than 12 lechamim on one shulchan. And they gave preference to the shulchan of Moshe. And therefore there were no lechamim on the other 10 shulchanos of Shlomo. Shenemar, the pasuk says in Malachim Aleph, it says Es HaShulchan Asher Alav Lechem Apanim. It says shulchan in the singular. So there was only Lechem Apanim on one single shulchan, which is the shulchan of Moshe. However, Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi Bey Rabbi Yehuda Omer Al Kulam Hayimisader. There was Lechem Apanim on all of them. Now, what does that mean? There's only 12 lechamim. So according to one interpretation, what Rabbi Yossi has in mind is they had a rotation system such that every single shulchan at one particular point for 1 week would get the lechem apanim. But there was never more than 12 lechamim. However, it seems that there's a statement in the Yalkut Shimoni that after the original 12 lechamim were placed on the shulchan of Moshe, the Kohanim would then place other lechem upon him on the other tables. Now I don't know how that works. That needs a lot of analysis. That Yalkut Shimoni. Shenemar, what was the proof text for Rabbi Yossi? Es HaShulchanos. Okay, now we're in the plural. The Alehem, and on them, Lechem Apanim. So apparently it was Lechem Apanim on all the Shulchanos. Tani, we learned in a Brisa, Mizrach Umarav Hayunisunim. Okay, now we have this long row of 11 tables, 11 shulchanos. So we have now machlokes tanoim, exactly in which direction would these tables set up. Is Rebbe holds me mizrach umarav hayunisunim. I mean, this makes a lot of sense. It was mi mizrach lemarav. In other words, as you enter into the Heichal, it's from the entranceway of the Heichal forward, towards the Ma'arav, towards the west. But Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omar, Safon L'Dovan Harnos, that means left to right, from north to south. So the Gemara says, Mandi Omer Mizrach Umarav Nicha. I understand Rebbe Shita, it works out beautifully, because Kulan Ru'uyim L'Sherus. Now, what this means is that the shulchanos had, which is going to be the next sugya daf Yud Ches for tomorrow, had to be placed on the half of the Heichal, which is towards the Kodesh Kadosh. And since the, 1 second, so each table was 20 amos, and from east to west was 40 amos, from the entranceway into the Heichal all the way to the Kodesh Kadoshim was 40 amos, so the Shulchanos had to be placed in the 20 amos towards the Kodesh Kadoshim, towards the west. Now, if each table was 2 amos in length, you can have them structured one next to the other within the 20 amos. I mean, there is a little bit of a problem here because you need space between each shulchan. But the Gemara is going to take that up. Is kulam ruyim l'sheirus, but man the omitzafa l'darom is nibtza shulchan b'darom, because the hechal was not 40 amos in width. It was 40 amos in length, meaning going from east deeper into the west towards the Kodesh Kadoshim. But going from one side to the other, it was only 20 amos. And the Gemara comes to no conclusion about this. So I'll just read to you the note here, and with that we'll end for today. He says that if the tables are placed from north to south, according to Rabbi Elazar, their length will follow the width of the sanctuary, right? Because the width of the sanctuary is north to south. And it's only 20 amos. So they'll fill the entire width of the chamber, and 5 of them will be located by definition in the south. And yet we learned from a pasuk, the Gemara is going to touch on a pasuk, that the table had to be on the north side of the Heichal. The Gemara assumes that all sides were lined up in one continuous row. And thus the question of the 5 tables that are on the south side remains a difficult, unresolved question. However, the Gemara Menachos on Daf Sadi Chesamid Beis presents a number of other kashas, and therefore comes to the conclusion that we had a wrong premise when we assumed that the tables were in one single row, one next to the other. Okay, then, so this is where we ended for today. And the Mirza Shem, tomorrow, will start Daf Yud Ches. Have a great day.